100 pounds of potatoes out of 4 square feet. That's what Daniel, my old order Amish neighbor, pulled out of one tower last October. Most American gardeners, myself included for the better part of 30 years, would be thrilled to get a third of that out of the same patch of ground. Here's the thing, Daniel doesn't have better seed. He doesn't have better soil. He has a stack instead of a trench, and he builds it in a very specific order with specific materials at specific times. I'm going to walk you through the whole tower in 4 steps exactly the way Daniel taught me, and at the end I'll share the one timing trick he follows every July that doubles the size of the second half of the harvest. I helped Daniel tip that cage over on a Saturday morning in the middle of October last year. We carried the haul up to Ruth's porch in 2 5-gallon buckets and weighed it on the same scale she's been using for canning batches for 40 years. 103 pounds from one tower, 4 feet by 4 feet of ground, 30 inches tall. I weighed it myself because I needed to see the number with my own eyes. Most American gardeners, and I was one of them for the better part of 30 years, would be thrilled to get a third of that out of the same footprint. Here's the reason. They're still growing potatoes horizontally. Dig a trench, drop the seed in, hill it once with garden soil, maybe hill it once more in July, and harvest whatever shows up. 30 to 35 pounds out of that same patch of ground if they're lucky. You're treating the potato as a single layer crop. Daniel treats it as a column. I'm going to walk you through the whole tower in 4 steps in Daniel's order with the materials and timing he uses, and at the end I'll share the one July move that doubles the second half of the harvest. Step 1, build the cage. Daniel uses welded wire fencing, the kind with a 2 by 4 inch rectangular mesh, the same wire most folks around here use for tomato cages and rabbit hutches. He cuts a length about 13 feet long, bends it into a square roughly 4 feet on each side, and ties the ends together with baling wire. The finished cage stands 30 inches tall. That's the magic dimension. Tall enough to give you 3 good hilling layers above the base, short enough that the column doesn't tip in a summer storm. Before you set the cage down, take a broad fork to the ground underneath, 12 inches deep. You're not turning the soil, you're loosening it so the seed potato roots can punch straight down without hitting compacted clay. Most American gardeners skip this step because they think the tower does all the work. The tower does most of it, but if the bottom of the column is sitting on hardpan, your lowest tubers never bulk up. Now line the inside of the cage with a wall of loose wheat straw about 3 inches thick all the way around. The straw is what holds your fill in place once you start hilling. Skip the straw lining and you've got soil pouring out the mesh every time it rains. Inside the lined cage, put down a base layer about 4 inches deep. Half finished compost mixed with shredded leaf mold. Half finished meaning it's still got texture to it, still got pieces of leaf and stem visible. It drains, it breathes. The roots love it. Total materials on one of these cages run about $15 to $20 if you're buying the wire fresh and you've got a straw bale around. Daniel told me the first time he walked me through this, and I'll never forget how he said it. You're not planting potatoes, Bill. You're building a column the potato grows up through. He pointed at the empty cage. He said the cage isn't a container. The cage is a frame for a living thing you're about to assemble in layers. Step 2, plant the seed potatoes. I plant 9 seed potatoes per tower, 3 rows of 3, spaced 16 inches apart on the base layer. That's the grid. Eyes facing up, always. Chit your seed potatoes before you plant them. That means setting them in a flat, in a cool, bright room for about 2 weeks until each eye produces a stubby green sprout no longer than your thumbnail. Chitted potatoes break ground a week earlier than fresh cut ones, which gives you an extra week on the back end. I use Kennebec and Yukon Gold for storage. Daniel grows a heritage red he calls the red ones from my grandfather. He's been saving seed from that variety for 40-some years and doesn't know the name. Says it doesn't need one. Wait until the soil hits 50 degrees before you plant. In Lancaster County Zone 6B, that's almost always the first week of May. Push it earlier and the seed sits cold and rots before it sprouts. I made that mistake my second year. Planted on April 20th because the air was warm, lost 6 of 9 seed potatoes to soft rot. Soil temperature, not air temperature. That's the rule. Cover the seed with 4 inches of your straw compost mix, not more. Plant them deeper than 4 inches on the base and you stunt the emergence. The sprout uses up its energy reserves trying to reach the light and shows up weak. 4 inches, eyes up, 16-inch spacing. Once they break ground and you'll see the first shoots about 10 days in, you've earned the first win of the season. Now, if what I'm walking you through here is making sense and you're starting to see how the layered straw compost mix at the heart of this tower is really nothing but a vertical version of the same soil building principle that runs through everything Daniel taught me. There's a whole chapter on it in the book I put together, Chapter 4, Building Pest-Proof Soil. It covers Daniel's composting method, the recipe I use in these towers, and why nutrient-dense soil grows plants that don't need spraying. It's for folks who are tired of the chemical treadmill and want a system, not a tip. The book is called The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. $17 at backyardbuildbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, point your phone at the QR code on screen. If you're on a phone or laptop, the link is in the description. Take your time pulling that up. Grab the phone, no rush. I'll be right here. All right, let's keep going. Step 3, hill upward in stages. Here is where most American gardeners would get this wrong if they tried to copy what Daniel does, because it doesn't feel right. You're going to add more fill to the cage 3 different times across the season, and the timing isn't on a calendar and it's on the plant. The rule is this: when the green shoots reach 8 inches above the previous layer, you add 6 more inches of the straw compost mix. Not before, not after. 8-inch trigger, 6-inch addition. You do this 3 times. The first hilling lands somewhere in the middle of May, about 2.5 weeks after the shoots break ground. The second hilling falls in early June. The third hilling falls in late June. By the end of June, your cage is full to the top, 30 inches of column with the green foliage still poking out above. Never bury more than the top 2 inches of foliage when you hill. If you dump 12 inches of mix on a young plant and bury all the leaves, the plant stalls. It uses every drop of stored energy trying to reach the light again, and you lose 2 weeks of bulking time. 2 inches buried, 6 inches added, leaves still showing on top. Why this works, and Daniel showed me this one afternoon by digging into the side of an old tower, is that a potato plant sets new roots and new stolons along any portion of stem that's buried in moist, loose, nutrient-rich material. Each hilling buries another section of stem. Each buried section sets another layer of tubers. By the time the cage is full, you've got 3 or 4 distinct layers of potatoes stacked one above the other inside the column. That's how a 4x4 footprint produces 100 pounds. I sat on Daniel's bench one June evening while he watched the second hilling settle in. He didn't say much. He told me, quiet, that the patient gardener gets the deep cage and the impatient one gets a trench. Step 4, harvest. You'll know it's time when the vines die back. In Zone 6B, that's somewhere in the middle of October, sometimes the first week, depending on frost. The foliage yellows, then browns, then collapses against the wire of the cage. There's a dry, papery sound to it when the wind moves through. That's your signal. Wait 1 more week after the vines die. Daniel insists on that pause. He says it lets the skins set. Pull them too early and the skins rub off in storage, and a potato without a skin won't keep 2 weeks. Wait the week, and you've got potatoes that hold through winter. Now the harvest. You don't dig, you tip. Spread a clean tarp on the ground next to the cage. Cut the baling wire holding the cage together at one corner. Lay the cage over on its side onto the tarp. The whole column comes down in a slow heap. Straw, compost, potatoes, all of it. Now you sort, layer by layer. Pull the straw out by the handful and set it aside for next year's compost. As you work down the column, you'll find potatoes at every level. Big ones in the middle layers, smaller ones near the very top and the very bottom. Pile them onto the tarp by size. When Daniel and I broke down last October's tower, we filled 2 5-gallon buckets to the rim and had a third half full. That's where the 103 pounds came from. Ruth's porch scale doesn't lie. Cure the potatoes for 2 weeks in a shady, dry, well-ventilated spot before you put them in storage. A garage corner works, a covered porch works. Don't wash them. Brush off the loose dirt with a dry hand and let the skins finish setting in the air. 2 weeks later, they're ready for the root cellar. 3 mistakes I see folks make when they try this for the first time. The first is using garden soil or store-bought potting mix to fill the tower instead of a straw compost blend. The column compacts under its own weight, drainage fails, and the lower seed potatoes sit in cold, wet mud and rot before they set tubers. I lost my whole first attempt that way back in 2004. Used the clay I had on hand because I figured soil was soil. The fix is the 60-40 mix. 60% loose chopped straw, 40% half-finished compost. The second mistake is hilling too late. Folks wait until the plant is 18 or 24 inches tall above the last layer before they add the next round. By then, the lower stem has hardened off and won't set new roots or stolons. You only get tubers from the bottom layer. The fix is the 8-inch trigger. Watch the plant, not the calendar. The third mistake is watering from the top with a sprinkler or a hose. The tower dries from the outside in, and a surface sprinkle never reaches the seed potatoes at the center. Tuber bulking stalls. The fix is to run a soaker hose down vertically through the inside of the cage when you first set the column and water deep twice a week in any dry stretch. I told you at the start about the one move Daniel makes every July that doubles the second half of the harvest. Here it is. Around July 10th to 15th, about 8 weeks after planting, when the lower leaves on the foliage show the first slight yellow tinge, but before flowering finishes, Daniel does one last hilling he calls the priming hilling. 6 inches of fresh finished compost mixed with 1 quart of hardwood ash sifted through a screen. He spreads it across the top of the cage and waters the whole tower deep with Ruth's compost tea, diluted 1 part tea to 5 parts water, run slow down through the column. The reason this works is timing. The plant is right at the transition from foliage growth to tuber bulking. The fresh compost feeds the upper stolon specifically, and the potassium in the wood ash drives tuber sizing. Without this single July step, I get maybe 45 to 55 pounds out of a tower. With it, I hit 90, sometimes 103. Daniel put it this way: a potato will keep growing tubers as long as you keep giving it stems to grow them on. Before I let you go, I want to come back to something. Growing 100 pounds of potatoes in 16 square feet is one thing. Keeping them eating quality from October through April is another, and that's something Ruth taught me through her root cellar. The exact storage method she uses for potatoes, the temperatures, the sand, the timing, sits in chapter 10 of the book, Ruth's Root Cellar and Pudding Buy. It's the natural other half of what I walked through today, and it's a system, not a tip. The book is the 30-day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, $17 at backyardbillbooks.com. Same as before. TV folks, scan the QR code on screen. Phone and laptop folks, the link is in the description. Go ahead and pull that up now. Take your time, I'll wait. So that's the tower. 100+ pounds of potatoes out of a 4x4 cage when you build it the way Daniel builds it. He's been doing this for 30 years. His father did it before him on a few hundred Amish farms across Pennsylvania and Ohio. Right now, this is just what May through October looks like if you want the other half of the Amish system, how they catch and store rainwater to keep gardens like this watered without ever picking up a hose. That one's worth your time next. I'll see you in the next one.